Okay, so last time we worked on the text up here at the top, and I've been changing it a little bit since then. I've added the ability to actually get it centered, make it bold, make it italic, change the color, change the font size, and all that kind of stuff. And now it's kind of ugly here in the code. So what we're going to work on today is getting all this set up in a configuration file, so we can just load that in, and then we can use configuration files for any of the different menus that we want to load in. So I've already created this inventory.json file. So I'm going to use this to build out the structure that I think I need for this menu. And then from there, try to build the code to parse that in and get it into the game. So let's get started with that. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create an object, and I'm going to call it inventory. And that is going to hold another object. Does that make sense? Yeah. Or do we just want to assume that inventory is the top level object? We can do that. Let's just assume inventory is the top level object. And then we can just set some of the stuff here, like we have the which background we need, what the height of the header is, how much padding we want around the header and buttons and stuff like that, how many rows and columns it has. So let's start out with the background image. So the background is called menu background. See, we have it called menu background in our asset system. So we just have to make sure that the assets are loaded before we try to load anything with the menus. But that's going to make sense because we need those images to be able to show on the screen anyway. So the columns, there's 4. So let's say columns are 4. Rows are 6. The header height is 150 pixels. And the padding is 15 pixels. The close button asset is called close button. Let's see, menu height, menu padding. What else oh, and down here we have the actual text. So I'm going to say title text is going to be inventory. Title font size is 20. Let's go ahead and set the title alignment. I was trying to decide whether or not it should be, like, it should default to center, but I mean that's probably something that we want to make sure is configurable. So we'll add that in. Title alignment. It's going to be center. Title vertical alignment is going to be middle. What else do we want? We just leave the text color default. Here I set it to cyan just for testing, but we can just leave it black. We got anything else in here we need? We have these items that we want to add to the inventory. So let me add those in there. For now, I'm just going to add one. I'm going to call it items, and that's going to have an array. And the array is going to be from now it's just a sprite. We'll probably want to add more stuff to this in the future, but for now it's just a sprite, so we'll just have an array of strings. Okay. So that should be everything we need to keep track of all the stuff for our menu. So I'm going to move this over here. I'm actually going to split this vertically so I can see both at once. Okay. Let's move the phone out of the way for a minute so we can see this stuff. And I'm going to create a new class to be able to load this stuff in. So let's come up here in the UI, make a new class. I'm going to call it inventory loader. Okay. And let's bring up asset loader for reference. Okay. Because we should these two should have a lot of common functionality, right? Like we should be able to, so like this read file content is just going to return an entire string, turn that into a JSON object, and then we actually get into the parsing of the stuff. I guess the only thing that's going to be the same is this read file content, because load image will already be done. We'll just get the images from the asset manager or the asset loader. All right. So what I want to say here is I want to say that this is going to have a public method that's going to be static, and it's going to return an inventory. I'm going to call it load inventory, and it's going to need the name of the file, it's going to need, let's see what we have in here. Oh, an inventory, render. It's going to need the screen configuration and the resizing info. Okay. So here we can just, for now I'm just going to copy and paste that method, and we'll worry about it later. This read file contents. It's a pretty simple method, so we'll just put it in here for now. Yep, we'll have to make it static so we can call it from the load inventory method. And it wants the asset manager. Okay, so we're going to need an asset manager. I thought we could just get instance on that. Oh, context. So we're going to need context too. Okay, that makes sense. So we're going to need a context. And here we will say context.getAssets. So that'll get us our asset manager, and then we're going to get a string, which is our JSON string, equals read from file, file name, and then the asset manager. And then we're going to want to surround that with a try and catch. Let's just go ahead and move this down in there too. Okay. Okay. Go away. All right. So now we have read the file in. We've got our JSON string, so now we can start parsing stuff out. So let's look at our JSON and see what's in there. And let's look at our renderer and see what order we do stuff in. So the first thing we're going to want to do is we're going to pull out the height of the menu bar at the top, the header bar. So we're going to say int header height equals, oh, but we need to turn that into JSON first. Yep. So let's turn this into a JSON object. JSON equals new JSON object. And we're going to give it the JSON string. Okay. And then we're going to need to add that, and then it's going to let us merge these. Okay. So now we've got the JSON object, so we can start pulling stuff out of it. So I'm going to say math.round JSON.getInt, and the int is called header height. And I want to multiply that by resizing info dot scale. That's what's going to let us handle different screen sizes correctly. So if we are, like currently the art assets are actually sized to fit the Pixel XL2, and we're running on the Nexus 5, or yeah, the old Nexus 5. So we're going to need to scale those down. So that's going to give us that information. Int header padding. We're going to do the same thing here, equals math.round JSON.getInt header padding times resizing info.scale. So we've got those two loaded in there. We're going to need, we've got screen config. We're going to need the menu background, the menu height. So this, we've got these two, we've got rows and columns. Let's get rows and columns. It needs to be get int. int rows equals json.getInt rows, int columns equals json.getInt columns. And then we need to start getting sprites for the close button and the menu background. So here we can get our asset loader. So I'm going to say asset loader assets equals asset loader dot get instance. So sprite background equals assets dot get asset, and then we want to get from our JSON a string that is called background, so we can tell which background to load in. We're going to get the close button. Okay, so that we can give it the close button. Now, let's do the heading stuff next. The header. Well, let's create the inventory, right? So we can say inventory equals new inventory. And we're going to pass in the screen config, we're going to pass in the background, we're going to pass in the header height, header padding, rows, and columns. Okay, so now we've created our inventory. So worst case scenario, right? We just return this inventory. And that should get us something. Okay, so I'm going to actually, let's give this a shot here. So I'm gonna comment out all of this here. Let's comment all of that out. And instead of doing that, we'll just say inventory equals inventory loader dot load inventory. We're going to give it context. We're going to give it the name, which we called inventory.json. Inventory.json. We're going to give it the screen configuration and the resizing info. And that should be everything that it needs. So now the phone has died, which is not super helpful. Alright, so now we should be able to start that. And while the phone's booting, let's go ahead and add some more stuff to this. So let's go ahead and get the header text. So text, header text equals new text. And here we want to get the name of the we need a couple of things here, right? So this one's the string, and this is the actual title. And we're going to get that from json.getString, and we called it title text. And then we want where this is positioned. So here is, we're going to have to do this same stuff here, right? We're going to have to get that here. So this is just background instead of menu background. And this is header height. And header height divided by 2. We should math.round that. And here, we'll just do the same thing here. Where we get the title and that new point. Pass that in. Let's also, so now we can say inventory set header text. Header text. And we've got the close button up here that we never actually did anything with. So let's move this down here. It's not set close button. It is add close button. Okay. So now this should look almost exactly the same, except for the word inventory should be black and it should have nothing in it. Let me just connect to the phone so we can see that real quick. Cool, okay. Pop that out. There we go. Ah, shoot. Come on now. Okay, pop that out, shrink that down, come over here, move you over here, bring the phone back up. There we go. Okay. So now we should be able to push this to the phone. Error missing return statement. Alright. So it's telling us that we haven't returned something here. So I'm going to say equals null. Remove the type here. And we're going to remove this return outside. Because the idea is if for some reason we hit this exception, we don't want to, we want to return null. We want to return that we weren't actually able to create the menu. Okay, pushing to the phone. And it crashed. Cool. So logcat, attempt to invoke virtual method sprite anchor on a null reference. Button.java. Okay, so when we tried to set the close button, it didn't like that. So let's put a breakpoint here and let's debug it and see what's going on. Oh, no, that's fine. I thought it was the capitalization of the close button, but I think that's actually correct. So let's see here. Yep, the close button asset is null. What about the background? Background is something, but close button is null. Why? Menu. Close button. C-L-O-S-E B-U-T-T-O-N C-L-O-S-E B-U-T-T-O-N. Okay, so this should be here, and this should be this, and it seems like both of those were correct. So let's look at assets here and see what we've got. Here's assets. We have 9 things in our assets. And we have an asset called close button. Oh, yep. Okay. It's because I'm telling the assets to give me an asset called close button with a lowercase c, but lowercase c is the JSON name for the actual asset name. So what I need to say is here I need to say JSON.getString, oops, close button. So passing the JSON key with the lowercase c will return the value with the uppercase C. So let's see if that works. It didn't crash, but it crashes there. Okay. So let's see what crashed. Null pointer exception on draw. So header text. Okay, so when it tried to draw header text, it says header text is null. So let's debug that again. Okay, so here we, get an exception. So what's the exception? Let's run it. Look at our logcat and see. No value for title text, because in the JSON I called it tile text. Okay. So what was happening there is we were asking for title text, but I had a typo in the JSON, so it didn't return anything, and it crashed here. So it crashed after we created the inventory, but before we added the header to it, so it couldn't show the header. Now this is crashing here on alignment. Attempt to invoke ordinal on a null reference. So do we... Oh, we didn't set the alignment or anything, but that's fine. We should probably just default it to some value. So let's default to alignment left, and vertical alignment should be bottom, because that's the default for Android text anyway. So that's probably what you would assume would be the defaults. So we'll just do that. Right? So let's see if that works. Cool, it does. So we've not done anything with the text yet, right? So it's still showing the menu, which is what we expect. It's got our close button, which is what we put in there. Later, we can add actual things to the squares in here. And then for now, let's fix this header code. So we're actually going to load in the font size. We're going to load in the alignment of that font. And then we'll move on to the items in the menu. So here we create our title text. So let's set some stuff on here. We're going to want font size. So we're going to say float font size equals JSON dot we're going to get int, because it is an int called title font size. I don't want to count on it being an int. Let's get float. Double? Yeah, get double. And then we need to multiply that by our screen configuration DPI to make sure that we scale the text correctly. And then we're going to have to cast that all back down to a float. Okay, so there's our font size. So we can say header text. Header text set font set text size, and we'll call that font size. Yeah, I'm not super stoked with that. I'm going to change that. I don't like. Let's call this set font size. Refactor. Okay. So now it's called set font size. I like that better. So we're going to set the font size, and we're going to set the alignment. Now the cool thing with this is that I can get the correct enum value from the code that we put in the JSON because it matches the name. So I can say header text dot set alignment alignment value of, and then I can say JSON.getString title alignment. And then header text dot set vertical alignment value of JSON dot getString title vertical alignment. Okay, so now that should finish everything up on the font size. So that should be good. Push that to the device and make sure that that looks okay, and that we've not messed something up there. All right, cool. So it's centered vertically and horizontally. It's got the correct font size, so that's all good. So now let's iterate through this array of items that we've got and add those to the list. So here I'm going to get a JSON array, items equals JSON.get, JSON array called items. And I'm going to say for, so the JSON array is not iterable, so we have to do the old school, like for int I stuff, I equals 0, so I is less than items dot length, I plus plus. And then we know that each thing in the JSON array is a string, so we just have to ask the asset loader for that string. So we can say inventory.add item assets.get asset items.getString at whatever index we're at now. So now that should load our pork chops or steaks or whatever they are. But no. Okay, so let's look at logcat. Null pointer exception, rules renderer, Attempt to invoke virtual method. Sprite draw on null reference. I don't have any other crashes. 190 background. Draw canvas. Nothing else seems to have broken. Inventory, add items. What? Inventory, add item. Assets, get asset. And then we're getting this string, which should be food, which should be fine. At index I. And somehow that broke our renderer trying to render the background? Oh, no. Okay. So that's just a problem. Sometimes, so Android Studio has added this instant run feature, and it works sometimes with like regular apps, but when you're trying to do stuff like this where it's not like a regular app lifecycle, it's hit or miss. So that's what the problem is here. It's just that it didn't go through the right initialization steps. So there were some things that were not initialized how the renderer expects there. Okay, so now we've got food. Okay, so now let's add something else. What do we want to add? Let's go to Chrome, and we will get a new tab here. Let's go over here, and let's do an image search for, I don't know, art easel. Yeah, and we'll do images, tools, type, clip art. Let's just use this one. View image. Save image as. For now, I'm going to save it to the desktop because we want to manipulate it a little bit, make sure it's the right size. So I'm going to close this. Going to open it up in GIMP. Because I don't have Photoshop. So we're going to use GIMP. And what we want to do is we want to open this, and then we want to go into our what's going on here. There we go. And then we want to go into our development folder, and we want to get our menu sprite sheet. We want to open that. Open. Oh. And GIMP's not presenting itself in the best light right now, is it? Okay, so this is our menu sprite sheet. So this is what we've got. Ooh. Here's our background grid. Here's our header. Here's some of our menu items. This is our actual like inventory icon. This is our store icon. This is our close button. Here's our stake. So each one of those little grid areas is 330 pixels by 330 pixels. So I'm going to make sure that's what this is. I'll leave the watermarks in there. Let's give it an alpha channel. And select that. We'll delete those. Get these down here. Delete. Delete. Okay, image, scale image. We want to take the big side and make sure it's 330 pixels. Scale. And then I'm just going to copy this. And paste it in here. paste it as a new layer, and then drag it over. Okay, so now we've added this to our sprite sheet. So I'm going to export it. It's going to be in app source main assets, and it is menu. Replace that. Don't want to say background color. Okay, and so the next thing we need to do is we need to edit the JSON file for all of our inventory stuff. So that's down here. So here's our assets.json to tell it to load in that new sprite. So here we have our sprite sheet, our menu sprite sheet, and it tells it what image it's looking for, and it has an array of sprites where we give the sprite a name, we tell it what X, Y, width, and height to pull out of that image, and then we give it an anchor point. The anchor point is not like super necessary at this point, but we'll just leave it in. So here, we'll do that. Okay. So the name is going to be easel. The frame is going to butt right up against the food. So it's going to be 1320 plus 330, so it's going to be 1650. The top is 0. It's going to be 1650 plus 330, so it's going to be 1980, and then that's going to be down 330 pixels. So that's the frame of the chunk of the image we're going to pull out, and then we'll go ahead and set its anchor point to be center as well. Okay. So now we've created a new asset called easel. We've loaded that into our system. So we should be able to just add easel to the list. Here, rerun the app, and it should get added to our inventory items there. So let's see how that works. It's off center. So let's see why that is. So I mean, it got added, right? So we loaded the new stuff in the sprite sheet. We pulled that correct chunk out. We found the right piece, we added it to our list, our asset system loaded it in, now it's in our menu, but it is not centered correctly. So let's look at why that is. In our inventory, when we're drawing, we iterate through all of our items and we draw them. So we actually set the frame for those when we add it. So we add it in background get frame left plus the column plus the cell width. Where do we, oh, cell width we calculate up here. Okay. So the top seems right. Oh, here we're overwriting that anyway, to say that it should be the top left. That doesn't appear to be what the problem is. Let's set a breakpoint here and run it in debug, see what happens. So yeah, the anchor points for those are totally useless, I guess. Okay, so let's get rid of that breakpoint and keep running. So now here we're adding an item. So this should be our food. Let's see what our cell width is. 165, which seems right. Oh, wait. Why is that different? Columns. 6. Oh, I got them backwards. I got columns and rows backwards. Columns and rows. Okay. So here, let's see if I got them correct in the JSON file. Columns are 4, rows are 6, which is correct. Here in the inventory loader, rows is rows, columns is columns. Let's do those backwards so we can just always say columns and rows. Okay, so we have columns and rows, and here I put rows and columns. Yep, that's exactly what happened. Okay. And it didn't matter on the stake because the stake is, you know, the top left corner. So it just didn't bump it over far enough when we added a second thing. There we go. Okay, so now we have the stake and the easel. So we can just keep adding stuff if we wanted. But what I want to do is I want to add a second menu because we have our little bag up there for our inventory, but we also have this store icon that's currently not doing anything. So I just want to make sure that we can load in multiple inventory classes using different configuration files and that they work the same. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm gonna come over here. Let's minimize this. First of all, before we even get started there, let's go into our renderer, and now we can clean up all this stuff that's been commented out. So all of that stuff in our renderer turns into this, which I think is pretty cool. Okay, so we're going to want to load in a second inventory. So we have inventory, and I'm going to call this one store. So down here, I'm going to say store equals inventory loader dot load inventory. It's going to take context. We're going to call this store.json. It's also going to need the screen config and the resizing info. Okay. And here we're going to change this from just printing out a log. When we click the store button, we're going to say store.show. Okay. And let's come in here. We're going to copy this inventory JSON, call it store.json. Move it down here with this one. And we're going to keep the same menu background, same layout. The title is going to be store. Just to make sure that we're bringing things in correctly, I'm going to change this to be 40 center, and I'm going to have no items. Alright, so now I should be able to run this, and in theory we will pull this file in, we will parse it into a new inventory, and we will tie that to the store icon in the little menu bar at the top. So we should be able to load in two completely different inventories that way, yeah. Okay, so here we have that worked, and the store does not work. So let's look at our logcat here. So it's still getting the touch and move. So I'm still getting events for that. Let's see. Tori. Oh, are we? Okay, so button bar handle click. So they should go through the left buttons and the right buttons. Okay, so we did add it to the button bar, right? Yeah, button bar, add button, store. Button bar alignment left. Okay. So let's see what happens here. So I'm going to set a breakpoint, run this in debug. So I have another class that's a button bar, and it takes those buttons and lets you put left buttons and right buttons so you can like sort of arrange them however you want. And it should pass any click events onto those buttons, but it might not be working. So let's see what happens. So here I'm going to click on the store icon, and if the frame contains this click, which it should because it goes all the way across the top of the screen, we're going to iterate through all the right buttons and all the left buttons. So we should only have one of each, and we do. So here's our left button, and it should be our store. Yeah, okay, so let's step into this. What? Oh, I stepped over. Shoot. So let's try again. Okay. So here I should step over this, over this, over this. And we should come into here. So here's our button. And our click is 7887, which seems reasonable. It does contain this, so I'm going to call my action handle. Which it didn't do. Why? What? Handle action. Renderer. Inventory.show. Can I set a breakpoint here, I wonder? Try that again. So it's doing everything that I thought it would do, but it's not calling the store.show method. Contains. Here we go. Store, yeah, okay, so it's calling that, so I can step into there. but we just come back to the button. Okay. So let's look at the show method on the inventory. So it just toggles the, okay. So it is being shown, it's just not being drawn because I forget to draw it. Store.draw. Jeez. Canvas, paint, delta time. Okay, so what was happening was it was actually changing the flags in the inventory. So it technically was showing the inventory. I just never gave it the chance to render. So I just never drew it. So it never got shown on the screen, so we were never seeing anything. It just changed the state of the thing and just never displayed it. So let's see if that works now. Okay. Hey, there's a store, bigger font and everything. And now that close button doesn't seem to be working. Funny, that close button is actually opening the other inventory. Okay, so let's look at handle click. Oh, so here, I just need to say if and not store as is probably not great. Handle click XY, then pass it onto the button bar. Really need to come up with some concept of it being modal, right? So we should be able to say if this thing is showing on top, like that should be the thing that accepts clicks, and if that doesn't accept clicks, then pass it on to something else. So if the store is shown, that should sort of supersede everything else, right? So there's the store, and close it, and there's the inventory. Cool. Okay. So that's pretty good. Let's see. So let's put a note in here, right? So let's put a note in here so that we know next time that we're doing this, we can handle this a little differently. To do add concept of modal UI. So that way, like I was saying, if it's on top, we don't have to think about checking everything in the right order, right? We could say this thing is on top now, so it gets the click, or we just go ahead and pass it to the rest of the UI to be handled. Cool. So for those of you who are watching, thank you so much. And we will do this again next time. Bye.